Hey, this is TJ from smokescreendesign.com, and I've got a video I wanted to make just talking about something that TigerDan was just talking about what Eric Dubay was talking about, and that is that Christianity was basically started as a sun worshiping religion, and this is something that's spread around a lot. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. So let me just play this short part about what TigerDan's got to say, and then I'll go from there.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a 20-second clip from this and then prove to you that either he doesn't know what he's talking about or he's deliberately trying to deceive you. So let's play the clip.
The Christian religion and Masonry have one and the same common origin. Both are derived from the worship of the sun. The difference between their origin is that the Christian religion is a parody on the worship of the sun, in which they put a man whom they call Christ in place of the sun, and pay him the same adoration which was originally paid to the sun.
So what Eric Dubay is saying here is just utter nonsense, and it shows that he's a bit wet behind the ears and not able and capable of doing research, because he's quoted verbatim, word for word, from the film Zeitgeist. Now, if you just type in Zeitgeist debunked, it'll throw up 105,000 results. And there's no shortage of videos out there. This one was posted 5 years ago. I haven't seen that particular video, but I have seen some really good debunks on this Zeitgeist movie. And now the whole purpose and point of Zeitgeist was to tell you the truth about a lot of different things. I think they brought up 9/11, and they get to Christianity, and the whole purpose of the Zeitgeist film was to lie about Christianity. And there's no shortage of people. You can look down this list, and there's no shortage of people out there who have debunked this Zeitgeist film. And I think I watched this one. That was Chris White who made that particular video, which is an hour and a half long debunking of this Zeitgeist movie, and Eric.
Okay, so I went a little longer than what I was planning on doing, but I just wanted to bring that out, that information that he was sharing there. And so let's see. So I wanted to make sure I put that. Now, Eric Dubay took that information, as TigerDan said, got that from Zeitgeist, the movie. And there's a lot of information about Christianity that people have taken from that movie and spread it as truth. But unfortunately, I when I listened to Chris White, as TigerDan mentioned, this was a long time ago, I believe that he brings out that that information came from Madame Blavatsky. I can't remember if that's what Chris White, where he came from, but the that information about Christianity and the Egyptian religion and how all those origins come from the Egyptians, that was something that was said by the mystery schools, and I haven't seen any proof to where that stuff about this Horus rising and all that. I haven't seen any of that kind of stuff actually shown to be Egyptian, but it has been shown that there are origins from the mystery school, the mystery religion school, and they came up with all of that interpretations of the Egyptian religion. And I want to talk more about this. So here we have. So I'm going to lead back into what he was just saying about the sun worship and Christianity, where Eric Dubay is partially right, and where he gets that from Zeitgeist, where it's partially right. When God created in the Bible, God created or changed Jacob's name to Israel, and that's why I put Israel here, not because of the country, but because Jacob is a big player in the Bible and going forward, and we've seen the scriptures where there's the kingdom of Israel, kingdom of Judah, where it kind of came down to those two people, those two players, so to speak. Throughout scriptures, it has always been the people of Israel and mostly tied to the land. So it's Israel, the people, and the land that God promised, and the nations. And it has always been that God always wanted it to be Israel and the nations together, of following, worshiping Him. He never wanted it to be Israel, this small group of people that are kept to themselves, and the nations are the outsiders that are damned forever. Never ever wanted that. He always wanted the redemption of Israel and the nations, and he wanted the people of Israel to be the messenger, the catalyst to bring the nations to this God. And he made Israel to stand out, to be different than the nations. And that's why there are all the commandments, instructions, laws, statutes, whatever you want to call them, for Israel, because he said, you are going to do these things and you're not going to be like the nations. So there's a definite distinction between what Israel does and what the nations do. Now, there's pretty big movement going right now that people that are part of the nations, the Goyim, Gentiles, Christians, Muslims, etc. But there's a movement among the either Messianic groups or the Torah observant groups or the one law groups, whatever, where many of them are saying that believers that follow Jesus should keep all the commandments, but it is there. It is clear in scriptures, and I can't remember the group's name right now. First Fruits of Zion. They've done a really good job in going back in and relearning, or not relearning, but restudying and figuring out that yes, the Hebrew and the scriptures are pretty clear that the nations are not required to do everything that Israel is required to do, but the nations can participate and follow as much of those as they want to and as they are allowed to, because there are some things that only the priests and high priests were able to do. So here we have, this is just kind of a representation of the people of Israel. And here we have a representation of the nations. And of course there's always way more of the nations than there are of Israel. And then there's also another type of movement where people of the nations are claiming that they are Israel. So that was something else I forgot that I was going to mention. So we got these two different groups, and here in the middle is where I have them where they join together, and this is what I'm calling the remnant that God talks about. It's the remnant of Israel, and I put this rectangle here and this rectangle here to kind of try to have some representation for those that are followers, believers in Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah, or is also called the Christ. So I wanted to have representation, so that's these two representations. And then they lap over here in the middle. And so that should be the remnant, so to speak, of the believers that are there in the middle. And I had this originally as the remnant, which I probably don't need now since I have this. And then there are, God has spoken over time about the remnant. And so, many of those people, well, those people were predates Jesus. Keep hitting the wrong button. So that's why I've got some extra gap here. Now, I know there are people who like to be the judge and say who's a Christian and who's not a Christian, who's a believer, who's not a believer. And we know in the scriptures that it says that there will be people who call me Lord, and I say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, or you wicked, or you sinners. So we know that there's going to be people like that. So that's why I created a remnant in here. And these are not a representation of like actual portions. So I just wanted a pictorial representation. So these are really all the people in the remnant area that God basically has said throughout Scripture that you think you're the only one to, is that Elijah? I think it was Elijah, or was that Elisha? I don't remember. But you think you're the only one, but I've got 10,000 set aside to myself that you don't even know about. So that's what these people are. Now, why I'm bringing all this in is because leading up to the time of Jesus, there's always been Israel and the nations. Even back coming out of Egypt, God led his people out of Egypt, and there were Egyptians, the nations that left with Israel. They were all together. And throughout the prophets, it's always about Israel and the nations joining together. And we see in the Messianic Writings, or also called the New Covenant, the New Testament, we see that there's Israel, there's the nations that are living in Israel. We've got Roman soldiers living in Israel. We have people who have converted to become Jewish. We have people who didn't quite take the full conversion. We have people who are just believers in this God of Israel, and they haven't taken any steps in the conversions, but they are just part of the nations, and they want to remain part of the nation. So we see these different groups, and so there's this crossing between these two people. So then Jesus comes along, and for the longest time, even up through Jesus' death, really the only people we see that are following Jesus are these people here. It's the Israel, it's the Jews. Now, in the scriptures it says the Jews rejected Jesus, or the Jews didn't follow Jesus, but it's not talking about all Jews, because it was only Jews that were following Jesus, Yeshua. They believed he was the Messiah. And there was this phrase that in English it's the Son of God. Now, some people think that they're talking about this son, but there is a play on words with son. You've got the righteous Shemesh, that's talk about that will have healings in his wings, which is interesting because we do see, and I don't know, we do see that in Egypt we have that sun with wings symbol. So there's this Shemesh, which is the Hebrew word for sun. So there is this play on this righteous sun that will come and will have healing. And so there was a time after Jesus was gone that this angel came, or Peter had this vision of this cloth, this sheet. Some say it was a tallit, a prayer cloth, and there's all these little like, critters and everything on it. And he says, eat, and Peter says, no, that's unclean. I'm not going to eat that. So we see that Jesus did not teach to eat whatever you want, because Peter refused to eat those things because, well, they're listed in the scriptures as to not eat those types of things. And I mean, they had spiders and all kinds of stuff that would have been in there, and I mean, not many people eat those anyway. So he said, no, I'm not going to eat those, which also shows that he was following God's law. He was following God's Torah, God's dietary, because he says those things are not clean to eat, so I'm not going to eat those. And so after several times, it's said to him to do that, and he rejects. Well, then later he realizes that God showed me this in a vision, not because God said I can eat whatever the hell I want to, and I don't have to follow his laws. So Jesus did away with it. Jesus did away with the dietary laws. I can eat pig now. So what he says is that God showed me in a vision these things which were unclean to eat, and what he was telling me was the Gentiles, don't call the Gentiles unclean, because I say they are clean. Because there is a separation between tradition that Israel was separated from the nations because they're unclean, stay away from them, which in some regards you think about Christianity today, don't go around those sinners, because you're a sinner if you hang around those sinners. So there's that type of division, and God did away with it. So at the same time, an angel was speaking to Cornelius, who was a Greek or Roman, something like that. And an angel had visited him, and so then he said, get Peter. So God uses that vision, which, what a bizarre vision to give someone to say, I'm calling them clean. Don't call the Gentiles unclean. And he had to give him that vision just to tell him to go basically to Cornelius. And Cornelius was in Antioch. And it's possible that these were the people that he was. Yeah, so, and this is where we see Peter went to Antioch. And in Acts 11:26, they became believers. They were baptized, which is a mikveh, which is a self-immersion in the water. You immerse yourself. You don't have anybody in the water with you. So as we see the baptisms today, where someone is dunking someone else, that would never have happened, because this is a ritual cleansing, and you have to go under this water as a ritual cleansing. If someone's in there with you, touching you, and they're not going under, it's so to be ritually clean, you immerse yourself, you stand in there, you dunk under the water all the way, and come back up a couple times. So all these people became believers in Antioch's house, and they were called the Christians first. It was the nations that were called Christians. So Christianity didn't even exist. There was no such thing as a Christian, so to speak, because the Christianity of today came way later, and it really got a jump start with the Council of Nicaea. There also was the Emperor of Rome. I can't even remember his name right now. Constantine. So that was a big jump in Christianity that began to develop. So what we ended up having was the nations coming in, and what religion were they following? Well, they were following the religion and tradition of Israel. There was no church. There was no church to go to with all the Christians. Their church is the same exact word as a synagogue. So you've got ecclesia, synagogue. They all mean the same thing. They're interchangeable. So there wasn't a church of all the non-Jewish people to get together. And there were only the gatherings of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they got together in the synagogues. And I know there are some people who said that there are Messianic synagogues. There's no proof for that. They all went to the same synagogues. Israel, whether they were believing in Jesus or they were not, they went to the same temple. They went to the same synagogues. So they have met outside of that. They've met in the temple, and that's how they baptized or had a mikveh for those 5,000 people in the book of Acts, because that was at the temple where they have the mass amounts of mikvahs, the mass amounts of baptism. So that's where they met, was at the temple, and that's how they were able to go outside and see 5,000 people. I mean, what house can you have 5,000 people outside of in the land at this time? There's not very likely. So later, what began to happen, and we see this going. We see this beginning in Acts 9, or sorry, Romans 9 through 11, where the nations, the non-Jewish believers, are starting to say, God rejected the Jews. God rejected Israel. The Jews aren't believing. And Paul is going into an argument against that, saying, what do you mean Jews don't believe? I'm a Jew and I believe. So when people say the Jews rejected Jesus, no, some Jews rejected Jesus. Most of the non-Jews rejected Jesus. Because in the non-Jewish religions, they didn't have a Messiah, especially those around Israel. They didn't have a Messiah. They had a Savior. They had a Savior, which was the Roman Emperor, which was a god. That was the name. That comes out of their religion, the Savior. So he was trying to stop them from going on this. It's us and it's not the Jews or Israel. So we also see that there were a lot of the non-Jews and nations starting to believe in Yeshua and Jesus and remember the religion, traditions, whatever you want to call it, of Israel. Because there were no Christian traditions. All the disciples, including Jesus, were Jews, and they always remained Jewish. Paul was always Jewish. There was no such thing as Christianity. He didn't become a Christian. Remember that they were called Christians first in Antioch. This wasn't until Acts 11. Jesus is long gone, and that's when the first people were called Christians. They were just Jews. That's it. They were all Jews, and they had different messiahs. There were a lot of messiahs during this time. So with all these non-believers, all these non-Jews coming to believe in the Messiah, we see in Acts 15, there's a big problem. The big problem is that they are amazed to hear that, whoa, what do you mean non-Jews are coming to believe in our God, in our Messiah? It was a big shock. And they had a decision to make. What do we do with all these non-Jews coming to believe? Because there are people saying that they have to convert, or they should convert, become circumcised, and follow all the traditions. Now, it's unclear of exactly who these people were. Some people call them Judaizers. Some say it's possible that it was people that were part of the nations that converted to become Israel, to become Jewish. And they're like, whoa, whoa, no, these people have to convert if they're going to be come into our communities and being part of what we're doing. They have to convert like we did. So it's possible that they were the ones who were trying to force these people to convert. Because remember, in the land of Israel, there's all levels of non-converts to converts. So some say it was the Jews that were doing it, but it's possible that it was these people who had converted previously that were trying to force this. So in Acts 15, they're like, what do we do? Do all these people really need to convert? And they said, no, that's way too much of a burden to be putting on these people. Really, they're the nations. They're not Israel. So there's only a few things that they need to do. I'm not going to list them all. You can read that. But did you notice that one thing they were not required to do and they had the temple was to tithe or give offerings? They were not required to tithe and give offerings. Now, why is that? Why were they not required to do this? Because today in church, it's like the first thing you learn is you need to tithe and give offerings, or you're going to be cursed and you cannot be financially blessed. You cannot receive the blessings that our ministry is under, the anointing we have, the magical powers of getting money. That's a side note just to think about. So there's just a few things. Don't worship idols. Get rid of idols. Don't drink blood. I believe like adultery, fornication, because that was extremely popular in the temples. So just a handful of things. And now we have Paul going forward with his message, which is commonly taken as anti-law, anti-Jewish, pro-grace. And his message comes out of Acts 15. And you have to understand that that's why Paul went forward with that message, because of Acts 15. He was speaking to the non-Jews, telling them, look, God has always planned to have Israel and the nations, and you are trying to become Israel because you think you are going to get more out of it. Circumcision is nothing. It's nothing for the nations. It's required for Israel. Nothing for the nations required for Israel. The nations are not Israel. They were not required to keep all the things that Israel is required to keep. And like I said, First Fruits of Zion, I read their research on this and absolutely nailed it. That when you look at context in the Torah and the law, so to speak, in the 5 books of Moses, when you look at the context, you look at the Hebrew, you look at everything, the nations are not required to keep all of the laws. So that was Paul's message. That's where it comes out of. That's why he's anti-circumcision, anti-law. And of course, you've got to look at what laws he's talking about, because you have to remember there's the laws of men, their traditions. There's the laws of their government. And then there were the laws and statutes and every commandments for Israel that are not for the nations. Now, I wanted to give you this history and jump ahead back to what TigerDan was talking about. So the movement among the non-Jews, the nations, of becoming Christian was really growing. It was really taking off. And what began to happen is you have Constantine. He made that the Christianity was the religion of Rome, as some say, that he didn't really become Christian, so he could fall in here. That he didn't want to lose power, so he joined and made it their religion. Now, what also started to happen was that in order to be a follower of Jesus, Yeshua HaMashiach, um, take one step back. So they came up with this word Christ, which is not a real word, which has been completely new ageized. So whenever you use the word Christ, then it has all these other meanings that it never did. And because these nations, they didn't have a Messiah, they had to try to come up with a word for Messiah to explain to them what this Messiah is. Now, the Mashiach is a person that is anointed. They dump oil on their head. They pour oil on their head. It's this one person that is chosen. So that's what this word Messiah. So they took this word Christus or something like that, which was like an ointment, put in oil on your skin. So they took this word Christus, something to that effect. And you can learn about that in Dan Gruber, my friend Dan Gruber's book. I believe he still has that in his book. I can't even think of it right now. Let me see. I'll tell you. What do we got here? He's got a lot of different books. Where are your books at, Dan? Oh, here we go. So there's the Messianic Writings. This is his translation, not a version. He translated the New Covenant, and he says it should be the Messianic Writings. Let me make sure this is visible. So that's his Bible translation. It's a way different read since he's used a lot of the more Hebraic words. Copernicus and the Jews. So this goes into a lot of just mind-blowing things about some of the information that I'm sharing with you. Gosh, so where was I? Anyway, I don't remember where I was. So the Roman emperor, he decided to take on the Christianity, and they were making it that if you want to, so it was Christus, okay. So if you want to be a Christian, you want to follow Christ, you have to reject all Hebrew, anything that was a Jewish heritage. If your spouse was Jewish and you didn't, and this, I'm not saying this is under the Roman emperor, but this is what began to develop over the years, that you had to completely reject anything that was from the Old Testament, that was Judaism or part of their Hebraic faith. And so the word Christus, they came up with the word Christos, which became their anointed, their word for the anointed one, which became Christ. So really, Christ is a terrible word because, look, we're smart enough. We know it's the Mashiach, and so that's really, we should really just get rid of Christ and use the word Mashiach, because it's just a terrible word, given that. So that's how they came up with this word Christ, which really is nothing. It's made up. So when people start saying, well, Christos or whatever is this, no, they made this up for these people to try to explain this concept of anointing, which is kind of not that great. But so then you have, with the councils of Nicaea and everything, they completely just Gentilize this Jewish Hebraic religion traditions that started, and just it completely morphed into something totally different that we have today. And with Constantine, what we get is a morphing of this Hebraic traditions, and I use the word religion very loosely because I know it's relationship, not religion, whatever. That begins to morph into this paganized form of this Hebraic traditions. That's when this layer, so you have Jesus, Yeshua, you have him over top of this story, these traditions, they lay the paganism. So Jesus and Mary now rise up to replace the Madonna. So let me show you. So you see that this is a pagan goddess and her pagan godson. This is not Jesus and Mary. And what they started to do is to take these pagan traditions and lay them over top of this Hebraic tradition. So it's not that this all started because of sun worship, but it's that sun worship and all these different deities were laid on top of it. So it's like, oh, we have Jesus and we've got this Virgin Mary. Well, guess what? We got this goddess that's a virgin. So now we're going to take this virgin goddess and call her Mary, the mother of Jesus, which her name isn't Mary, it would be Miriam. Just FYI, Jesus did not have a brother named James because there's no James in this Hebraic tradition. It would have been Jacob. So King James, you know how the Bible's so perfect? Well, King James either had his name put in it, or they put his name in it, made him the brother of Jesus. So they took Jacob and made it Jesus. I'm sorry, James. So James should actually be Jacob, but thanks to King James, it was changed. So whenever you see any of this sun worship, like you have the Celtics, so with Constantine, he had a sword that became the cross. So the actual cross would have been an uppercase letter T. So let's see. An uppercase letter T. This is what the cross would have looked like, but that's not a very good one. But that's what the cross became because of the sword of Constantine. Keep throwing myself off. So that's basically how Christianity became this pagan tradition, not because it started that way, because Jesus came to basically reform Israel and what they were doing. What did he say? I came for the lost, which is not unsaved people. The lost were people that were Israel, that were Jews. And he came to correct the traditions, because he says the traditions of men is what he was against, that made it too burdensome on the people to try to follow God, because the rabbis, some of the rabbis were making it, Pharisees were making it too hard, and the Sadducees were so loose and in bed with the government and with the pagan traditions. So he was coming to gather Israel back in and bring the correct interpretations and bring them back on path. The Celtic cross, so that's where I was going. So with the cross of Constantine, well, later people said, well, we'll just use the Celtic cross because that's a cross which is definitely has a sun worship symbology to it. So a lot of people started to bring in their own pagan traditions into this Christian faith. And if you look at the Catholic Church today, they are still accepting pagan traditions into the Catholic tradition. And that's what happened. The um, the Roman Catholic Church took over, and when they went into new countries, they adopted the pagan traditions to get more people, which, it's been a big money thing. They got more money, got more numbers, got more control over people. So they adopted more and more and more um, of these pagan traditions, and that's why people were so fed up with all of the control, all of the paganism, the corruption, just the complete ungodliness, and um, that's why the Reformation was such a huge thing. And I'm not saying that that was a right thing, good thing, wasn't controlled opposition or whatever that people say, because I can't really say, I don't know. But that's why that was such a big thing, because people were like, we are done with this corrupt church. And they started the Protestantism to get away from that. And you have people like the Puritans who wanted to be pure, and a lot of the people that came over to the Americas followed a lot of the Hebraic and Israel Jewish traditions. Like Thanksgiving would have been a festival time, gathering, which would be the Sukkot, which is in the scriptures. Which actually, most people don't know this, but there are 3 pagan traditions that God allowed Israel to do. Sukkot is one of those, the harvest gathering. There is Pentecost, which is a pagan tradition, which is Shavuot, and that was the beginning of. Let me see. And then there was Pesach, which is Easter. So those are the 3 pagan traditions that God allowed Israel to have their own version of, and he told them how to do that. So a lot of people go off on certain things like Halloween being pagan and shouldn't be doing that, or you shouldn't even be doing your own versions. But that's God allowed Israel to take some pagan things and make it their own, but not have the idolatry inside of them. So that's why there's so much of the paganism that people are able to identify and point to Christianity to say, look, yep, that's paganism. But the unfortunate event for them is that they don't go back far enough. They only go back to the times when the nations took over and started changing everything. They're only looking at what has been the result today, or like I said, post when I keep thinking Constantine, when Constantine took over, when the Council of Nicaea took over. So when they took over, they're only going back that far, even if they go back that far, which they may not. So they don't go back to Israel and when Jesus was on the scene, Yeshua, and what that was all about. So that's why I say that these people are partially right, but it's a layer placed on top of the true traditions that makes it look like this. But as far as the other things that people say is that Christianity was taken from the Egyptians, and so all of this is a story that's made up that they rewrote from the traditions of Egypt. A lot of this stuff I haven't really seen from Egypt historically, but then there's also some issues where people are saying that a lot of these things that are in Egypt are actually way later than what they're saying. So there's a lot of lies and a lot of deception, and people just not really doing the full research. If they read something in a book, They see it in a video. It's on YouTube. It must be true. Run with it. So this was like a foundation that you may not have ever heard before. And this is a lot. I don't even know how long I've just went doing this. And so a lot of information. And this may open up your eyes to just maybe to a lot of new insight. And when you read the scriptures and how to, I mean, just looking at the players is extremely important. Very important. To understanding the Bible and what's going on, because there's a lot of Jew versus Christian, but you have to understand that Jewish believers weren't Christian; they were Jews. So hope that this is something that you really enjoyed and maybe bring some insight and make some sort of impact in your studies and your learning. And if you've got any questions, feel free to post them. And if you're a naysayer and you just want to talk trash or whatever, don't even bother, because you'll just get blocked. Because I block everybody that you just want to be a troll. You just want to call people names and say how dumb they are or whatever. So that's all. That's all I got. Now I'll wrap this up.